It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and welcome to our home. Our family room is right here. You can see that we just love being in here. It's a comfy place.
It is. We can hear birds outside. We got blackbirds and cardinals and hummingbirds humming outside in the porch. They're not as bothered by this heat in July and August as we are.
You know, hummingbirds are tough. They'll put up with extreme weather. And
pound for pound. Those are, or rather, ounce for ounce.
They are amazing little birds. So yes, we're glad you've chosen to join us today. We've been talking with Doug Woodward about the Septuagint. He's got a great 2-part book series that's called Rebooting the Bible.
You can go to his website, faith-happens.com, and get signed copies of the book right there. And, of course, Amazon will carry it. But if you go to Doug's website, you can get the books. Also, he's got a rather quick read on a deep study on a topic that he's written about extensively and that we have yet to cover, as we're 150 episodes in on this program, and we're still only up to Revelation 14. But the identity of Mystery Babylon. Who is Mystery Babylon, or Babylon the Great? Is it a city? Is it a world system? Is it an entity? Is it all of the above? And if so, who are they? Scholars, prophecy students, theologians have been trying to figure that out for 2,000 years, and we haven't settled on an answer yet.
Well, we're getting there, and of course, I have an opinion on that, as you well know.
Yeah, as do I.
Yep. And our guest also, we'll talk about that after the break. But first, we want to remind you of a couple of things. One is that in the month of August, we have a great offer, and that is Derek's first novel, The God Conspiracy. I remember when you were writing this.
This actually was out in about 2005, and when things got strange here recently with lockdowns and mandates and so forth, it suddenly became very relevant once again. And so we decided to republish it. It was updated, republished with a new cover. The magnificent Jeffrey Martis doing the artwork on this. And better theology, because we've learned a few things since 2005 about the nature of the spirit realm and the religion of the ancient Mesopotamians, which obviously was an effort by the fallen realm to confuse the world, especially the ancient Israelites, about who really runs the world. So that was updated in the novel as well. But then as an added bonus, we'd like to offer these two-disc DVD sets, teachings, one called Unmasking the Ancient Gods, which were presentations that Sharon and I gave at the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Norman, Oklahoma, actually, a couple of years ago. Yeah. So 6 hours of teachings here and 6 hours of teachings here from a weekend conference in Sanger, California, which is near Fresno. Cross Point Church, Pastor Greg Crocker had me out along with Troy Anderson and Paul McGuire. And I gave 6 talks in the span of 2 days. And but it covers pretty much all of the research behind what we've been writing and talking about for the last 5 years. So basically 12 hours of teachings on 4 DVDs plus the novel, $120 value for just $35 plus shipping and handling. That's our August special at the Gilbert House store.
Yeah, so go to gilberthouse.org, and our store is there. You can download our free app there. You can watch video there. You can do all sorts of things at that site.
Yeah. Now, Babylon is one of the symbols of the spiritual wickedness of the ancient world. And I think there are a number of layers to that, a number of different theories as to what is represented by Mystery Babylon. Some believe it is the Church of Rome. Others point to the United States. That's Doug's belief, that America is in end times prophecy as Babylon. Joel Richardson has put forth the theory that it is Islam, and I lean towards that because of the connections that I wrote about in Bad Moon Rising.
Well, you know I don't. I actually lean in a different direction.
No, I know, and I respect that because I think there is some overlap there in those ideas. Some will look at the seven mountains and look for cities with seven hills like Rome or even Jerusalem, which was our friend Chris White argues that it's Jerusalem. But when we understand that mountains are often symbols in the Bible to represent spirit beings, fallen angels, I think we're looking at something more than a geographic location. And that the woman who rides the beast, who is the spirit being called Mystery Babylon, Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte.
That's what I think. And at the time that many of the ancient, the Old Testament was taking place, let's put it that way, that Ishtar was being worshipped and things like that. The God Gate, the Bab El,
right,
was representative of where the god or goddess would enter the city, because each city had a god or goddess.
Right.
Therefore, a city was representative of an entity.
Yes, and it's not a surprise that in Aramaic, the word for city, the Hebrew word for city is identical to the Aramaic word for watcher.
Yes, exactly.
So you've got this idea of a supernatural entity or a patron deity overseeing a city. So yeah, it was in the Bible, it's more like each nation had its own patron deity, but the concept is the same. Israel belonged to Yahweh, whereas Moab belonged to Chemosh and Ammon belonged to Milcom. In Mesopotamia, they were cities that were devoted to certain gods.
And they usually, we don't want to get into too much of this because, trust me, we will spend a lot of time on this when we get to that Revelation 17. But yeah, we tend to think of cities as, okay, the capital of this state or the capital of this country. But those capitals, that represents the country. When we talk about England, we talk about London.
Yeah.
When we talk about the United States, it's Washington.
Right.
So back then, the nation was represented by this main city, and then you had satellite villages, towns, and sort of countrified areas with shepherds and industry in the periphery.
Right. Well, one of the questions that Doug addressed in the new book, Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the End Times, is the question, is Mystery Babylon literally a reconstructed Babylon on the site of ancient Babylon in what is now modern-day Iraq? There are some teachers, in fact, Chuck Missler was one who believed that this was the case. Doug addresses that question when Unraveling Revelation continues. Who would have thought just a few years ago we'd find ourselves in a world where refusing an experimental medicine could keep you from traveling, going to the store, or even cost you your job? Actually, we did. My novel, The God Conspiracy, was published last year when it suddenly became much more relevant than it had been when I started writing it more than 15 years ago. And I drew on characters and ideas developed by Sharon a few years earlier for her novel, The Armageddon Strain. We'd like to make The God Conspiracy available to you as part of our special offer during the month of August. It's a fast-moving story of people, ordinary people, who find themselves in circumstances beyond their control, and the only ones who really understand what's going on are those who see that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. During the month of August, we'll send you The God Conspiracy and 12 hours of video teachings. Our 2 DVD sets, Unmasking the Ancient Gods and This is War. 4 discs in all, 12 hours of video teachings. A retail value altogether of $120 for just $35 plus shipping and handling. This offer is only available during the month of August and only at our store. Available online at gilberthouse.org. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we want to remind you that we're going to go to Israel in March of next year.
Join us. We'll be there from March 19th through 30th with an optional 3-day extension to Jordan. See what Moses saw when he got his only look at the Holy Land. All of the details, the itinerary, and a breakdown of cost. A place for you to reserve your spot online. You'll find the link at gilberthouse.org. Look for the Travel With Us link. Now, Doug Woodward Will Babylon rebuilt in the last days? End times prophecy is so fascinating. There are a number of mysteries that scholars are still arguing about 2,000 years after the revelation of John. And joining us is a gentleman who we've really come to respect as a researcher and an author. More than 20 books in 10 years, many of them dealing with end times prophecy, including Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days? Of course, we've talked the last couple of weeks about his 2-volume set, Rebooting the Bible, Volumes 1 and 2, which show the value of consulting the Septuagint. His website is faith-happens.com. We welcome back Doug Woodward. Doug, the idea that Babylon the Great, Mystery Babylon, that's one of the identities of characters in the end times, locations in the end times that's been argued over for years. There are some who argue that it literally needs to be rebuilt. What's your view?
Right. Well, in short, my view is that that's a too simplistic, too literal interpretation of Revelation 17 and Revelation 18, and so I've written extensively on that, and I've had some help from co-authors and so forth. We wrote a book about 10 years ago called The Final Babylon, which is really dealing with the issue of could America be in the Bible? Could America actually fulfill an aspect of Babylon? And so, so I've been writing about it for a long time. I wrote 2 books called Power Quest, books 1 and 2, which dealt with the coming of Antichrist in America. I've written another book, a lengthy book called American Requiem, Why the USA Will Collapse in the Last Days. This book is responding specifically to the belief that the city of Babylon on the Euphrates, even though it's essentially in ruins, although there is a small, I don't know what it is, maybe 3 or 4 acre city that's been rebuilt as sort of a tourist attraction by Saddam Hussein. In fact, it even has his name on the bricks because they were rebuilding it at the time. So
that was a practice of the ancient, That was the practice of the ancient kings of Sumer and Akkad. They would stamp the king's name. Nebuchadnezzar built this. Saddam clearly had...
he had that in mind.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And so, but anyway, the city of Babylon, it had fascinating history, of course. The chapters in Jeremiah 50 and 51 talk about the destruction of Babylon, that it would be an utter destruction. And there's, I think I'd added up in just chapter 50, there's 49 verses, and 25 of them are predicting the destruction of Babylon. All right. And yet, what we know is historically, Babylon was not destroyed. In fact, it later went on to be the capital of Alexander the Great. His capital was Babylon, and I think he actually died in Babylon.
Yes, he did.
And his body was transported back to the city called Alexandria, Egypt, which of course was a city that he had designed when he had conquered Egypt. And so his generals, Ptolemy in particular, brought him back and created a tomb. And of course, that's another subject. Did we really find Alexander's tomb in Alexandria? It appears that we did. So, but anyway, Babylon, will it be rebuilt? The verses in Jeremiah 50:51 suggest that Babylon has never been destroyed, but yet it will be destroyed, which would tell us that it must be a future prophecy yet to be fulfilled. Now, there's some pretty notable people that believe that Babylon will be rebuilt. One of those is the late Chuck Missler, which, of course, we all respect his point of view tremendously. Then there's Mark Hitchcock, a fellow Okie, who has written many, many, many books on Bible prophecy. There is Joel Rosenberg, who's professed the same. And then more recently, in fact, this is the book I was specifically responding to, a book by, oh, goodness sakes.
Andy Woods?
Andy Woods, thank you. Yeah, it slipped my mind just there for a moment. Yeah, so Dr. Andy Woods, who usually does a fantastic job. In this one case, though, I disagree with him on whether or not Babylon will be rebuilt. He argues that he believes that it will. He also argues that he believes that there is one and only one Babylon, and that Revelation 17, Mystery Babylon, and then Revelation 18 and 19 that talk about Babylon the Great, that those are one and the same. He even quotes some verses from Jeremiah 50 and 51 as we might call them attributes or features of Babylon of the last days. I take a very different approach and believe that is not accurate. And I did an exhaustive study on this in a book called American Requiem, which I mentioned, and then I also drilled down a little bit more on some aspects of the things that Dr. Woods talks about in his book. And I believe he calls it Babylon, the Bookends of History, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, I drill down on some of those issues, talk about the reasons that he believes Babylon on the Euphrates will be rebuilt, and the reasons why I believe that his arguments are inaccurate. And it really gets to the heart of Bible prophecy, the traditional, we'll call it the dispensational view. I am a dispensational, just like Andy Woods is, and like Chuck Missler is, and Mark Hitchcock, and I believe even Joel Rosenberg. I believe he would be dispensational as well, although I'm not 100% sure. But nevertheless, so we're all dispensationalists, but we have different point of view on the issue of Babylon. And I go so far and make the audacious claim that I believe America itself is in the Bible and represents one of three aspects of Babylon in the last days, specifically the fulfillment of Jeremiah 50 and 51.
How will that look to us? And again, we'll set aside the argument as to when we are caught up out of here, whether it's pre, mid, post, what have you. How will that look to the people around to see it? Let me put it that way.
Well, according to Jeremiah, I mentioned before that over half of the verses in those chapters relates to and predicts the utter destruction of Babylon. And this is the daughter of Babylon specifically, which I believe is a distinction from Mystery Babylon, which I tend to believe is more of a religious, not just the Catholic Church, but really any Christian church that is not teaching the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And then there is Babylon the Great, which I believe that scholars throughout the ages have said is Babylon is a world city. It represents a city in opposition to the city of God. City of God, the city of Babylon. City of Babylon represents a system that opposes God. And so I believe that America, it's part of, and it certainly would be a key part of Babylon the Great. I don't believe it's Mystery Babylon, although there's an aspect of America's interest in the occult and the paranormal that tends to play into that. But I believe that the daughter of Babylon, Jeremiah 50:51, is America. And unfortunately, because the discussion in Jeremiah is so intense regarding the destruction of the daughter of Babylon, I know that those of us that believe in the rapture, we're kind of hoping that the rapture happens before God's judgment on America occurs. But it appears, if I'm right, and many others that agree with me on this, if we're right that the judgment of God is coming on America, and if we're here when it happens, well, the Lord will protect us in some cases. In some cases, some of us will become martyrs. And we'll just have to wait and see which one it is.
So the woman, she's got a sign that says, the name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and the earth's abominations. And then we've got the beast on which she rides, which are 7 heads, 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. So you're making a distinction between a geographical, geopolitical entity and then a religious system.
Yes, that's true. Now, Dr. Woods would argue that it is should be emphasized that it's a geographical location, not a system. I believe, though, that all the scholars would suggest, well, it may be a geographical location, but it is also a religious system. And I believe that is very plain. We do know that, in fact, even John himself, as he's writing the book, the angel's talking to him and is explaining these metaphors, and in most cases goes ahead and says, yes, the woman rides, these the seven heads and so forth. But the explanation is those seven heads are seven mountains, and then those mountains are kingdoms, and those kingdoms, in fact, include kings. And so you have symbols. I almost think they're ciphers, and then you have an interpretation that is also given right there in the same chapter. And you see kind of the same thing in Revelation 18 as well. So I tend to believe Mystery Babylon is it's a great mystery because it is supposedly a Christian church or churches or just Christian system, and yet it is totally against Jesus Christ and his gospel. That it struck John as, this is a true mystery. How could it be?
We've got some teachings within the church, and I don't want to step on any toes here because I know some very sincere believers who follow some of this, but it would seem that the whole idea of the seven mountains would be an area where discernment should argue for some caution before applying those, that as an interpretation.
Right.
We've also, Sharon and I have discussed this yet, but we've not gotten to Revelation 17 yet, 150 episodes in, we're not there yet. But we've seen in other writings from the Second Temple period, like the book of First Enoch, that mountains are often used as symbols for angels. When he's taken to the netherworld, Enoch is shown these burning mountains that are described as angels who had sinned. So are you looking at these mountains, again, as geographic markers, like you need to find a city with seven mountains in it, or are you looking at this from more a supernatural perspective?
Well, funny you should ask, because obviously the city of Babylon on the Euphrates, there are no seven mountains around Babylon.
Right. Yeah, it's
it's in a flat plain.
Right.
It is a city that once was on many waters because Sargon. It was either Sargon. No, it was Hammurabi that actually built this massive canal system almost 4,000 years ago, and so Babylon was very well watered. And it was, in fact, the famous song, and I forget which psalm, you might remember, Derek.
The Waters of Babylon.
The Waters of Babylon, that that we're told or asked to sing songs of Jerusalem while we sit on by the waters of Babylon. So we know that the Euphrates River is associated with the city of Babylon, but the mountains are not, clearly not. And so, of course, the traditional view of Hal Lindsey, good friend, good brother Bill Salas, would suggest that Rome is Babylon. And Rome, in my view, Rome is a part of the story, probably a part of Mystery Babylon. It probably isn't, in my view, part of Babylon the Great, because I think Rome may be destroyed because the scripture says that the Antichrist and these 10 kings are going to utterly burn and destroy Mystery Babylon. And so, of course, this is one of my arguments, and I'll slip this in here real quick, that the reason I say there are 3 different Babylons, which sounds outrageous, but the reality is that each of the Babylons has different attributes. They are destroyed at different times. They're destroyed by different enemies. For instance, the daughter of Babylon, which I believe America fulfills, is destroyed by nations from the north, nations that fire arrows at Babylon, and none of which return void. And those arrows would come over the North Pole.
Right.
So right. And then you have Mystery Babylon destroyed by the Antichrist and the 10 kings, and then you have Babylon the Great, destroyed by this fellow we know as Jesus Christ. And it is the destruction that comes upon Babylon the Great is the sword that comes from his mouth, the word of God. The word destroys Babylon the Great. And so you have different forms of destruction, different times during what I believe is the final 7 to 10 years, and a different party that destroys them, if I didn't already cover that. So there's all 3 of those distinctions suggest to me that there really are 3 facets or aspects of Babylon in the last days.
Fascinating, and I know we've only scratched the surface, but we've run out of time once again this week. The book here in question is Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days? But for other writings about Babylon and America as Babylon in the last days, Doug, what books should viewers look for, and where would they look for them?
Well, the book that you might want to begin with, which was a bestseller, is The Final Babylon, written by myself, Doug Krieger, and Dean McGriff. That book was published back in 2013, I believe it was. And so that would be, one of the books you might want to go with. If you really want to get into the study of the paranormal and how America mirrors that, you would want to read Power Quest Book 2. The more recent books, The Next Great War in the Middle East, is a book that talks about the War of Gog and Magog. And I take a view that the next great war is not Psalm 83, and it's not the way that the Islamic Antichrist theorists believe, but it is in fact the War of Gog and Magog. And then finally, the book you mentioned, Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days? And then my most recent book, well, second to most recent, is American Requiem, Will the United States Be Destroyed in the Last Days? So as you can see, I've written extensively on the subject. So I champion myself, I guess, as probably the culprit, here that is carrying the prophet's sign, warning that the end is near.
End is near, yeah.
Yes.
Well, that just means look up, for our redemption is also near. And we thank you for your research, for your work, and for your friendship, Doug. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. I always enjoy being with you, Derek.
Well, that's an interesting concept. And again, 2,000 years after the fact, we're still debating it.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, though, because if the Lord wanted to give us absolutely point by point, as you say, Excel spreadsheets, he could have.
And then
but that would have told the fallen realm everything, because as we mentioned last week in 2 Peter, the Lord, through Peter, tells us that his timeline isn't an Excel spreadsheet. It isn't a calendar that you can mark off and know exactly how many hours are left. He is stretching it out because he is giving us grace. And so the fallen realm, after Jesus was rejected in the first century, they're all going, wait a minute, where'd this come from?
Right.
And what time is it? They don't know.
No, but we believe that we are between that 69th and 70th prophetic week, the 70 weeks of Daniel. Go back into our archives and see the programs about that. We're waiting for that 70th week to begin. And we think that'll be kicked off by the resurrection of the body.
Yes,
off the
we do.
Yeah. What if we're wrong about that? Well,
we're not going to argue with Jesus.
We're not going to argue. No, we're not going to say you didn't fit our timeline here, so you're here at the wrong time. Take us later. We'll go whenever he says it's time. And until that day, professing the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. He has gone on ahead of us to prepare places for us. And as he told his disciples, in his Father's house, there are many mansions. And I'm looking forward to that new address.
So am I.
Yeah. And we pray that you're there with us. Thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation. Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at unravelingrevelation.tv and gilberthouse.org. That's where you'll find our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. Join us as we study the Bible every week, verse by verse, in chronological order. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri, 65633.